Hey there gamers, DreamcastGuy here. Today we're talking about the future of PlayStation because there has been some very strange Sony leaks about the PlayStation 6 that honestly are pretty bad, but we're also going to talk about some new stuff that Sony themselves has just said at CES, the Consumer Electronics Showcase. Now, the CES every year is very interesting because only Sony shows up. This is very much a tech-focused press conference. And since Sony really does all sorts of stuff outside of PlayStation, like their phones and TVs and stuff, this is really where they kind of come out and talk about what they're up to tech-wise. But they also historically have talked about major console advancements here. This is actually where they first revealed stuff about the PlayStation 5 before it came out. So people kind of expected that if the PlayStation 6 is coming in 2027, they thought we'd probably see it here, and we didn't. But let's talk about what they did show at CES and their weird new idea for games playing themselves. Let's break it down. This is going to be a big video all about PlayStation. If you could please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, let's begin with the fact that, honestly, CES this year, much quieter. I think one of the only things that was really cool is, some of the stuff where they showed new graphics from, hey, here's some NVIDIA footage. Honestly, I'm glad anytime we can see anything new about Resident Evil Requiem. Look, here's the real good thing, right? We're going to see here in just a second. They now showed one of the things that's been talked about at Resident Evil Requiem is that it's going to be partially open world. This is the first time we're actually seeing that open world map. You know what? If nothing else happens at CES, as a Resident Evil superfan, I'm glad we got a peek at this. But here was the very strange thing they announced. During the entire CES showcase last night, it was at like 11 p.m. Texas time. I'm not joking. They came out on stage and parked a bunch of cars on stage and said, hey, check it out. We're now doing Sony Hondas. They'll have Astro wallpapers and Gran Turismo themes. You can even customize the sound of your emotor. Very, very strange. They also said the back seat will now have a special remote play screen, so you can actually stream your PS5 to your car. Very odd just in general. A lot of the comments are like, brother, this is just the kind of stuff that I feel like nobody's actually going to do. Sometimes I feel like companies do stuff just to bump up stock price. Hey, look how much we're advancing car technology. This stuff is whatever. But here's the patent that also came out last night that a lot of people are not exactly thrilled about. Sony has patented a new technology that would see PlayStation games play themselves with the help of AI. Essentially, they're talking about the fact that you get stuck on a boss or you're trying to do a particularly difficult platforming section inside of Celeste or something like that. You can ask the AI inside of your console to play the game for you. Now, this to me is so ridiculously stupid. Now, technically, not every Sony patent ends up coming to fruition. There was actually a patent a couple of years ago that's hysterical where Sony had the idea of making it where you'd have a camera or a microphone aimed at your mouth while playing PlayStation games, and it would show a commercial, and you couldn't end the commercial until you said the name of the brand. The example they had for it is it showed somebody eating a burger, and the guy stands up on his couch and goes, McDonald's! That's an actual Sony patent. Thankfully, that never happened because my God, would that be absolutely cringe-tastic. But this to me seems so useless, just in general, right? Like, I don't know. To me, the reason I play games is almost entirely at this point, I love the gameplay beyond all else. I love good stories, but let's face it, I don't know. I feel like the older I get, the more I just appreciate really fun stuff. I think that's part of the reason I loved Astro so freaking much is that it's just raw, pure, absolutely perfect gameplay, right? I don't know. It just seems so weird to be like, what if we AI skip this? Especially because I feel like Sony games are already so good about basically having a lot of difficulty options. This seems the most useless on a PlayStation. To me, this just seems like weird, again, investor crap. Wow, our consoles are advanced with the power of AI. People are trying to cram AI into everything because it sounds good to absolutely moronic billionaires trying to pump up stock price. This is not for the gamers. It's not for the consumers. Nobody's getting out their phone and going, oh, good, I'm so glad that I have Meta AI trying to ask me if I want to Photoshop my own pictures, right? They did also say, hey, we're still working on Marathon. They did, hey, we have a portfolio of upcoming games, and they showed 1 second of Marathon. Marathon comes out in less than 90 days. And the only thing they can say is, oh, our future PlayStation games are going great. They showed a picture of Marathon. I don't know why. I thought that was absolutely hysterical. But I think that the big thing about PlayStation 6, I want to get into the PlayStation 6 leaks. I think it does tie into some of the talks that happened at CES. Samsung CEO and other people that are like NVIDIA people and stuff were talking a lot about the memory shortages, that there is a worldwide shortage of RAM with everything, right? And this is about to start hitting everything because everything now is connected. You know what? Actually, I had this picture saved. People were joking about this. This guy was talking about the fact that like his treadmill is trying to ask for log information. Everything now has to constantly be connected. Everything is part of this giant infinite neural network, right? So because of it, there is such a RAM shortage. There has been talks that essentially right now, Sony is in a very strange and scary spot. They're a bit terrified internally because apparently they've already signed a lot of contracts to begin the manufacturing of the PlayStation 6 in mid-2027, to have it out either late 2027 or early 2028. And so their thing is that now they're in a spot where like, all right, we've already paid to have factories built, to make these chips, to get this stuff assembled. We already have all these people ready to go. If we're going to delay this to 2030 or something like that, will this make the prices go up or down? Because currently, RAM prices have only gone up. No RAM prices are going down. They're at the point now where they're talking about actually releasing older generation tech. They're bringing back older generation graphics cards and stuff to free up RAM shortages. So according to Moore's Law is Dead, who has been incredibly accurate, essentially, they're still trying to decide whether they conclusively want to delay the PlayStation 6 because currently everything internally is still apparently full blast, full speed ahead to release it in 2027, which seems to be super crazy. Yes, if RAM situation is looking much worse by then, Sony could still make the decision to delay it. Now, some people are debating whether this is real or not because historically, Sony has been a very strange sort of a last minute drop the news on developers kind of company, for better or for worse, which is that essentially what they did with the last one at CES, when they first revealed the specs of the PlayStation 4, they actually surprise unveiled it. Originally, they were supposed to be like 4 gigs of RAM, and then they announced it was going to be 8 gigs of RAM. They turned to just sort of drop this on people. Despite studios having dev kits with 4 gigs of RAM, 8 gigs of RAM was a very late surprise. So some people are basically saying that what could be happening is right now, maybe internally, they're trying to figure out how low of a power can we get the PlayStation 6 before the graphics completely suck. There's probably a lot of people right now that have PlayStation 6 dev kits, a lot of those most trusted first-party studios. I bet that there's been talks that years before the PS5, some people like Rockstar and stuff already had PS5 dev kits. I think there is a chance that the alpha prototype PlayStation 6 dev kits are right now at places like Rockstar and Square Enix and stuff. And they're probably a bit underpowered compared to what the final version would be. But at the same time, I do think that this whole idea of trying to force out the PlayStation 6, this to me feels like an investor decision more than a game company decision. Now, let me just say what I mean, which is that right now, so many companies right now are so based on that giant investor feedback, their board of directors. Okay, not just what consoles will sell the most, but what looks the best publicly. So many of these companies are so dead obsessed on like, how do we look financially in this quarter? It's not even about selling the most systems. It's just literally, all right, what can we say or do that'll bump up stuff for this quarter? And I think they're almost afraid of how bad will it hurt our stock if we come out and officially say, all right, your choices are PlayStation 6 comes out on schedule 2027, 2028, but has less RAM to make it less than like $2,000, or the option is delay it, or option C, all right, we release it, it has a ton of RAM, but it does cost $2,000. And I feel like right now they're probably talking to their own investors, their own teams internally, and saying, what at this point will not absolutely sink the ship? I'm still in the camp, and I know I say this almost every single video at this point, cheaper is better. I will take whatever it takes to make the PlayStation 5 cheaper. I want the cheapest PS5 possible. I want the cheapest budget version of a PS5 before the PlayStation 6 comes out. If anything, I want the PlayStation 6 to be delayed for years and years and years so that PS5 has a ton of time to get out there, to sell, to get exclusives, to get cool games, and fully utilize the power of it before we start getting that next giant leap of tech and more likely price tag. But these have just been some off-the-cuff thoughts. How do you feel about the future of PlayStation? How do you feel about the idea of AI gaming? And just in general, what for you is too soon for the PS6? Tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and please keep dreaming. I've been playing so much PlayStation 1 lately. I love it, man. Something about PlayStation 1, I don't know, man. That to me, obviously that's what I grew up with maybe the most. Crucially, I feel like the systems that affected my entire growth as a gamer the most are PlayStation 1 and obviously the Dreamcast, beating all, 216 Dreamcast games. But man, playing PS1 games, especially on current tech, 4K, cool CRT filters and stuff, they just look fantastic. They're so special.
Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.